Hello, my name is Trevor, and I will be reviewing Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 follows the story of Guy Montag. Guy Montag is a fireman, but in this world, a fireman is not someone who puts out fires, it's someone who starts someone. Guy Montag starts these fires to burn outlawed books, books outlawed by the government for making people think and disturbing them. Guy Montag was completely content with this life until one day he assisted in the suicide of a woman who harbored illegal books. He drenched her in kerosene and she lit the match herself. This awoke something inside Guy, and he realized, why am I burning these books? What is so special about them? So he intended to find. So let me pick up a few details that I've left behind while doing the synopsis so far. Guy Montag has a wife named Mildred, who he refers to as Millie. He also has a next-door neighbor. She's a young woman named Clarice. She's very eccentric, and Guy is captivated by her. Guy also has a employer at the fire department named Captain Beatty. Captain Beatty is a tried and true fireman who thinks books are just dreck. Technology has a huge presence in this world. Everyone has screens, or what they like to call parlors. It's 4 screens around you if you have enough money to pay for all 4. That allows you to experience your shows like you're part of it. On top of all this, Guy has actually been harboring books behind his wife's back. He has them hidden in his home. After he accidentally assists in the suicide of the woman who was harboring the books, he called off sick from work. And he was very conflicted about everything that had happened the night before. Captain Beatty comes to visit him and informs him that every fireman has a point in their career where they wonder what it's all about. They wonder why they do this, why books need to be destroyed. And he says this being well aware that Guy is harboring books. He knows, but he doesn't know how many. He thinks he has 1. After this meeting between Captain Beatty and Guy Montag, Guy insists that he and Millie need to read these books to understand why, and if Mildred loves him, she'll do this for him. Mildred wants nothing to do with this. She just wants to sit in her parlor and look at her screens. Guy then proceeds to read, and he starts to pick up bits of information, and he's wondering why different books have different opinions and why they conflict. I think this is where Guy truly finds the essence of books, when he discovers that having opinions and wanting change and being a rebel can really make a difference in society, which has not been explored as of late in this world. After realizing that Millie is practically just not caring at all about what Guy has to say and why he wants to read these books, Guy remembers a meeting between he and a guy named Professor Faber that he met in a park one day. He had seen him put something in his pocket, and he decided to talk to him. He was suspecting possibly it was a book. This guy was a literary professor back in the day, before books were practically outlawed. Well, Guy gets in contact with Professor Faber, and at first Professor Faber thinks this is all a ruse to get him to admit that he owns books. But in actuality, Guy just wants to try and understand. That's what he wants more than anything. He wants to try to understand these books, and he believes Professor Faber can lead him to these conclusions. Guy then travels to Faber's home, and at first Faber is reluctant to let him in, but after he shows him a copy of the Bible, Faber realizes that Guy is on his side. And then they have a conversation that I think is one of the most important in the book, and I'm just going to read an excerpt from that. He is listing the reasons why books are important and why we understand them and how they change us. And he says there's 3 reasons why. And I'll just start reading from the excerpt now. Number 1. Do you know why books such as this are so important? Because they have quality. And what does the word quality mean? To me, it means texture. This book has pores. It has features. This book can go under the microscope. You'd find life under the glass, streaming past an infinite profusion. The more the pores, the more truthfully recorded details of life per square inch you can get on a sheet of paper, the more literary you are. That's my definition anyway. Telling detail, fresh detail. The good writers touch life often. The mediocre ones run a quick hand over her. The bad ones rape her and leave her for the flies. So now I'm going to discuss this point, because if I didn't, this wouldn't be a review, it would just be a synopsis. But I think what Professor Faber is getting at here is that books carry substance, they carry opinions, they carry what the writer is trying to convey, to convince, or to portray an image of a society, of a way of life. And I think Faber is trying to say that other mediums, at least in this world, don't carry that same life. And when he's discussing writers doing things such as touching life or raping it and leaving it for the flies, some people will have lighthearted books where they just touch on issues, and others will be manipulative, like books discussing communism or things like this. They can be manipulative, so they rape the issue. And that's my opinion on the first rule. Now, we will get to the second rule. So, in the second rule, it's a conversation between Guy and Faber. So, before I say what they say, I will say their name. So, Guy says, and the second, Faber, leisure. Guy, oh, but we've plenty of off hours. Faber, off hours, yes, but time to think? If you're not driving 100 miles an hour at a clip where you can't think of anything else but the danger, then you're playing some game or sitting in some room where you can't argue with the four-wall televisor. Why? The televisor is real. It is immediate. It has dimension. It tells you what to think and blasts it in. It must be right. It seems so right. It rushes you on so quickly to its own conclusions, your mind hasn't time to protest. What nonsense! What I believe Professor Faber is getting at here is that books let you digest information. You can look at a book, read half of it, and then put it down. And then you can digest that information that you took in. But in this world, turning off your TV isn't really a thing. You sit in your parlor with your four walls and you talk to the walls and they talk back and they coerce you into feeling things. You don't have time to digest anything. You just accept what the world says and you do as it says. That's simply how people live. But books, that makes someone think. That makes someone talk out, have different opinions. The third point that Professor Faber speaks about is a little more vague than the other two, but I will read it and review as I did the other 2 points. So, Faber says, and number 3, the right to carry out actions based on what we learn from the interaction of the first two. And I hardly think a very old man and a fireman turned sour could do much this late in the game. So what Faber is trying to say is that with a mix of quality and a time to digest that information, you get the third, which allows the person who read that to act upon what they read, to try and change things. So breaking from the intense detail of that conversation between Guy and Professor Faber, they start to hatch a plan to try and bring books back. And Faber is very apprehensive. Faber is kind of a coward. He wants to be the man on the computer screen. He doesn't want to have to get in the action. So what he does is he gives Guy these little green earbuds. And it allows them to speak to each other without having to talk. So it's pretty much like telekinetic speech. So they hatched a plan for Faber to go and retrieve someone who used to print books and they're going to try and print more books because nothing like that exists right now. So they're going to try and bring that back. But before they can do anything like that, Guy has to make it through Captain Beatty, who is expecting him to bring in a book the next day. Captain Beatty will otherwise find them out and burn down Guy's house. So they really need to figure this out. So Faber's plan is to be in his ear and try and lead him through discussions with Captain Beatty so they can get past this and move on with their scheme. At this point in the book, they also start talking a lot about the war. So war is extremely common in this society, like nuclear war, all the time. And there is another nuclear war on the horizon, and everyone just expects them to win because the place where Guy lives is like a super society compared to the rest of the world. So Guy returns home, and Millie has two friends over. They're discussing life, well, mostly just the show that's on the parlor, because that's all they ever talk about. But when Guy's there, they start talking about their husbands, because Guy's asking them about them. And they're asking about children, and Guy pretty much puts these women in their place. He yells at them and tells them, you've had 2 past husbands that are dead who committed suicide because of you, and you've had 9 abortions and you can't take care of your children. And then he reads an excerpt from a poetry book, and it literally makes one of these women weep from just listening to poetry. So Guy kind of flew off the handle, and this entire time Faber's in his ear calling him a fool, saying you're gonna ruin the entire plan. Literally just maybe an hour after the conception of the plan. So the 2 women leave in a huff, obviously angry from the crazy fireman spouting poetry out of his mouth, and Guy Montag leaves to go talk to Faber. And Faber practically says, I understand. I can't pass judgment upon you. I'm a coward. And he says, people wouldn't learn anything if they didn't get, make mistakes sometimes. And the Guy appreciates this. So after their conversation the next day, Guy goes to work at the fire department. And this is when he was supposed to turn in his book. And he did turn in a book. And Captain Beatty starts spouting, just absolutely destroying Guy Montag with lines from books. And he's denouncing books. He's saying they're stupid. This book says this, and this book says this, and then he says some completely complicated line out of some book. And this throws Guy into a confusion, and Professor Faber's in his ear the whole time. And it's kind of a mess. It's a little bit of fiasco, but it's pretty much Captain Beatty pretending to be friendly. Shortly after this exchange, they get a call to go to a house to do a burning. And when they arrive, Guy Montag realizes that this is his house. His own wife, Mildred, and one of the women that he scared the bejesus out of when he read poetry had turned him in. And Captain Beatty was just he didn't care anymore. Guy was out of control. So he confronts him and pretty much says, your books will be burned, you will be taken away, either to prison or be killed. And Captain Beatty punches him in the head because he noticed that he had an earpiece in and that he was listening to Faber. And in a fit of rage and self-preservation, Guy ignites Captain Beatty with a flamethrower and kills him. This is huge for Guy. Guy was pretty much a coward, just like Professor Faber, but now he's really putting his money where his mouth is. He's acting upon his beliefs, and that is exactly what he wanted to try to learn from books. So I think this is a pivotal point in the story for him. So after killing Beatty, he flees the scene. he retrieves some of his books, and he couldn't think of anywhere else to go but to Faber's house. So he goes to Faber's, and on the way he realizes that there's a televised manhunt for him on TV, where everyone in town, this huge city, this metropolis, is watching him being chased down by one of the robotic dogs. These robotic dogs have 6 legs, and they have a syringe that comes out of their mouth that they can stick out whenever they want, and it euthanizes things when they stick them with it. And he knows that this dog has a scent and that it's tracking him. So he goes to Faber's, and they talk for a moment. They hatch a new plan for Faber to go and find a new printer and try and print way outside of the city. And Guy is going to go on the lam. Using alcohol to rub his scent off of anything in Faber's house, they then flee to go their separate ways. Guy is trying to make it to a river. He's trying to get out of town. He wants to make it to the railroad and follow that straight down to the city where he and Faber will meet, where the printer is. He watches on the television as they can't find him because the dog lost his scent because of the alcohol. So they take a random innocent man on the street and have the dog kill him, and then say that they found Montauk. So the city lied. And then Guy makes it to the river. He finds the railroad, and he's pretty much scot-free. And at this point, he meets 3 homeless people who all used to be professors, or they were a father, someone who cared about books. And since that's what they did, they cared about books, they were cast from society. They were useless. And he tells them what he plans to do with Faber. And they say, well, we've already been kind of working on something. They have a society of people on the railroad in small towns who have memorized books because it's too dangerous to actually carry the books. That's how you wind up dead. But you memorize the book, and they can't kill you. There's no way they could get that information out of you or know you from another person. And he loves this idea. And right after their conversation, and they become good friends, the city behind them is destroyed by a nuclear bomb in an instant. Then the 3 men come together, and they realize that this is their chance to rebuild. Throughout the entire book, they've been talking about things being destroyed and then rebuilt. This is their chance to rebuild from the ashes of the previous society into one that values books. And that's where Fahrenheit 451 ends. I think it is an excellent book, and I chose it for a special reason to be my first video. This book is about cherishing books and how you should interpret books. And I think it's very important in today's society for us to have books, have other people's opinions, and respect them, which is far and rare. It's far in between when you see that. I hope you enjoyed. This is my first attempt at a YouTube video. Let me know if you have any tips, or if there's any books that you'd like me to speak about in a future episode. I'll kind of be just doing these whenever I have time. So, again, thank you. Subscribe. Signing off.